Om Ajnana-timirandasya Jnananjana-shalakaya Chakshurunmilitamena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. Narayana Namaskrityam Naram Chaiva Narottamam Devim Saraswatim Vyasam Tato Jayam Mudirayet. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Okay, so far we have been going through the second canto, and we have concluded our discussions of chapter 6 in the previous session. And today we would be talking about chapter 7 of the second canto. We would be summarizing chapter 7. And chapter 7 is entitled Scheduled Incarnations with Specific Functions. So this is again a continuation of the conversation between Lord Brahma and Sri Narad Muni. So from the previous chapter, Lord Brahma describes his complete dependence on the Supreme Lord, and he basically iterates the importance of his dependence by one verse where he talks about the fact that he would never be able to, rather he says that I never make mistakes. I never make mistakes because I'm holding on to the lotus feet of the Lord. So he's making a statement there saying because of his dependence on the Lord and his meditation and his devotional service and him being situated transcendentally, not being affected by the lower modes of nature, even though he's engaging in activities quite heavily on a day-to-day basis, he says he is completely dependent and he never makes mistakes and he always speaks the truth because he's holding on to the lotus feet of the Lord. So Lord Brahma fundamentally is giving us a process which was delineated in the previous chapter, where he speaks about being situated in the higher modes of nature, which is the highest mode being sattva. Being situated in sattva gives him an opportunity to be able to receive instructions from the Lord. In other words, it is the most conducive platform to be situated in for us to be able to come in touch with transcendence. Think of this as climbing a peak. If consciousness is to be rated as a peak and you're trying to scale a certain peak, there are different layers or plateaus we would reach as we scale a peak. At the highest point is when we will have an opportunity for us to be able to experience consciousness which is least affected by the lower levels of the peak. So in that sense, Lord Brahma, he's seated right at the top of consciousness. If consciousness were to be imagined as different lokas and universes and planets in the system, he is situated in Satyaloka, which is the closest planet to the spiritual sky. And it is also described in Shastra as having all the facilities of Vaikuntha planets. The only difference is that at the end of Lord Brahma's life, even Satyaloka meets with some level of destruction. That's the difference, because the entire material sphere is rolled up in different ways, and that meets with some amount of destruction. There is a concept of beginning and an end with Satyaloka. However, because of the sheer fact that you're talking about one day of Lord Brahma being equal to 1,000 yugas, which is trillions of years, 1 trillion years, trillions of years of his lifetime is almost like an eternity. If you use the word eternity and you talk about trillions of years, for us, that scale is not something that we can conceptualize. We can't really understand it. It's beyond the scope of understanding. What is 1 trillion years of someone's lifetime? That is the lifetime of Lord Brahma. But yet there is an end. There is a beginning and there's an end. That is also the experience of Satyaloka. But there is very little influence of the mode of passion. There is very little influence, or practically zero influence of the mode of destruction, almost imperceptible. And as a consequence, being situated in the higher level of consciousness, Lord Brahma is able to understand the plan of the Lord. He's able to come in touch with transcendence more profoundly in a much more easier, clearer manner. And once he understands his nature and once he understands who he is in relationship with the Lord, He receives insight as to what the blueprint of the Lord is in terms of what he ought to be doing. So since then, he acts on the blueprint of the Lord. He makes no mistakes. And because he is situated and acting on the instructions of the Lord, and he's also directly receiving instructions from the Lord, and he's repeating those, as a consequence, he is saying, I make no mistakes, and I'm holding on to the lotus feet of the Lord. That is my refuge. That is the reason why I'm able to escape from engaging in such activity. Enormous activity, because he is the creator. As he sleeps, a portion of his creation is destroyed. So you can just imagine that as he wakes up and he creates the lower planetary systems, as he goes to bed, it gets destroyed, because that is the nature of the lower planetary systems. But one day of Lord Brahma is 1,000 yuga cycles. Hard to imagine by any scale, by us. Very difficult to even conceptualize. So the point which I'm just trying to make here is that he experiences destruction as well as he goes to bed. He wakes up again and he starts his process of creating. The point which we're trying to make here is that one can be affected by such experiences. But Lord Brahma says that because I'm transcendently situated, I'm acting according to the Lord's plans, and because I'm holding on to his lotus feet, then as a consequence, I don't get affected. Very important is that normally the process of spiritual practice is supposed to give us knowledge, which is the pursuit of jnanis. Once one acquires knowledge about the material sphere, this is called vairagya, they develop detachment. Knowledge, jnana, produces detachment because they realize that there is absolutely no point in endeavoring for objectives that are going to be destroyed. So if most of our existence on the planet is towards objectives which are eventually going to be meeting destruction, then the question is, what is it that we have achieved in life? Because as we leave the planet, all we leave behind are a majority of time which has actually been engaged in activities that have been destroyed, regardless of what we do, regardless of what is created. If Lord Brahma's fate is such that a part of what he does every day gets destroyed, one can only hardly imagine what happens to what we do, because we are, in most cases, not in touch with Krishna's plan. Lord Brahma is in touch with Krishna's plan. He is situated in the highest planetary system. He is engaging in the process of creation, and in adhering to a blueprint given by Krishna. But regardless of all these aspects of protection, still he experiences destruction. So in that sense, a part of our life, or most of our life, we would notice is that we have just spent in terms of destruction. Sometimes this destruction that occurs in life and the frustration of not being able to achieve our desires, which is basically experiencing more of passion and more of ignorance, builds a certain level of knowledge. We come in touch with knowledge. It gives us a certain sense of what is the point? We ask ourselves this question, what is the point? Why am I engaging in activity which predominantly gives me grief, which predominantly gives me anxiety or produces grief? Why am I doing this on a day-to-day basis? So this question keeps coming up in our mind. So this is basically coming in touch with some level of knowledge through experiences. This produces detachment. And once there is knowledge and there's detachment, then there's also what is said is that one also should engage in devotional service. Now, our acharyas are very clear. One who engages in devotional service, one who brings his senses in touch with Krishna's senses, one who distributes, for example, a book of Bhagavad Gita, one who engages in the distribution of books, one who engages in direct preaching, or one who facilitates the preaching activity in this movement of Lord Chaitanya, they are engaging in devotional service. This devotional service automatically brings both knowledge and renunciation. Both of these are gifts that are produced automatically when one engages in devotional service. We don't need to objectify knowledge. We don't need to objectify detachment either. We don't really go for the lower levels, the lower rungs of achievement. Knowledge and detachment are automatic results, or I would say spillover benefits of engaging in devotional service. So the devotee who engages in bringing their senses in touch with Krishna automatically are rewarded with the benefit of both knowledge and detachment. What is this knowledge? The knowledge that we receive in coming in touch with Krishna in this lifetime, profoundly by his holy names, because that is directly coming in touch with Krishna. There's no difference between Krishna and his name. Through the Bhagavatam, which is non-different from Krishna, and through seva to the temples, through the temples of Vraja, seva through the worship of the deities, which again is the worship of the deities can be included in the seva of the temples. When we do all of these, what happens is we are coming directly in touch with Krishna. When we come in touch with Krishna so profoundly, the knowledge that we receive is of our eternal relationship. We develop mellows of what relationship we basically are in with Krishna. This happens gradually over a period of time. So finally, first we come in touch with the sadhu who gives us faith. Then the faith is watered through association and bhajana kriya, which is basically to engage in sadhana. Once the faith is watered, it starts fructifying. Then it allows us to be able to develop true knowledge. The sambandha, our relationship with Krishna, so slowly starts sprouting. Slowly starts sprouting. When it starts sprouting in our heart, the sambandha that we have with Krishna, or the relationship that we have with Krishna, when it starts revealing itself in the heart, we then start engaging in the activity of throwing away aspects of our life which are not directly related to that relationship. And as a consequence, we develop new relationships, we develop a new way to use time, we develop new objectives and goals in life, and then that process of us being able to remove the weeds or remove aspects of our life which are not directly related to Krishna is called anartha nivritti. Nivritti is to be free. And slowly, steadily, constantly coming in touch with Krishna himself directly through his names and through Srimad Bhagavatam allows us to slowly learn who we are in relationship with Krishna. This is Sambandha Gyan. This Sambandha Gyan is knowledge. And as Sambandha grows in our heart, we automatically develop detachment from aspects of our existence which are distinctly not conducive for devotional service. So Vairagya, which is pursued by great sages and great, I would say, performers of austerities, is achieved quite easily by the process of devotional service because our limbs are coming directly in touch with Krishna's limbs. When we engage our limbs and our senses directly in touch with Krishna, we automatically are having the capacity to be able to purify ourselves. And Krishna Sambandha, which is basically the whole objective of sadhana bhakti, is for us to be able to reinforce Krishna Sambandha, reinforce the identity of who we are in relationship with Krishna. That is knowledge. That is chit. Yeah. First of all, we are engaging in activity which is sat. Sat means the absolute truth. Sat means which is particularly related to the spiritual sky because it never changes. It is not malleable. It is static. It is dynamic in the sense that you experience different things. It is static in the sense that you don't have this truth being defined in different ways. Relatively, every few years, someone comes up with a new theory, says that this is how they want to define it. It is Sat. It never changes. So first of all, when we come in touch with Krishna, we're coming in touch with Sat. The Sat potency is that which is eternal. So when we are pursuing a relationship that is eternal, that is Sat. That is why it's called Satya. This is the truth. Because you're pursuing a relationship which is eternal. It is Sat. Yeah? This is an eternal relationship. It never goes away. It's not going to go away with the body. It's not going to go away because we develop some kind of, mental, I would say, a certain level of, affliction of the mind, which people experience sometimes during some kind of disease or even during old age, where they tend to forget what they've learned. This doesn't go away. This relationship is Sat. This Sat is encouraged. Then there is Chit. Chit is basically knowledge. Once we are in touch with something eternal, we also learn what is the characteristic of that eternal object. What is the characteristic of Krishna? What is my sambandha? That is Chit, the consciousness of understanding my relationship with Krishna. And then you have Ananda, which is basically the joy that is experienced in coming in touch with that which is eternal and in complete knowledge. So once our knowledge level of who we are in relationship with Krishna, goes higher and higher, it improves the way we interact with him. It improves the way we interact with him. It improves the way we interact with the world. This is not alien science. It's a very simple way for us to understand that this is how human beings function even with each other. When they understand who they are in relationship with someone, and the love between two people, when it grows, then they have the ability to be able to serve the object of their love better. This is very, very straightforward. This is what we do with the Lord. As we understand who we are in relationship with Him in the mellows of relationship, one could be a servant, one could be a friend, one could be having parental affection towards Krishna, and then one could also assist the residents of Vraja, the gopis of Vraja, in their eternal affairs of love with Krishna. So that is Madhurya Ras, which is the highest pinnacle of achievement in terms of different proximities towards Krishna, towards the Lord. So the point we are trying to make here is that that is anartha nivritti, where we are slowly, steadily giving it up. So there is knowledge, there's detachment. Our detachment is basically an understanding that everything belongs to Krishna. So we tend to use everything we have, most importantly our time, in relationship with the Lord. We want to give Him our time fully. So you would notice that as we make advancement, greater is the inclination for us to be able to devote a great deal of time towards devotional service. We are constantly trying to rearrange a schedule, make ourselves more efficient in being able to offer more. And that is required. It's also a symptom of advancement while we are constantly thinking on how to strategize, how to move forward. This is very important for us to understand how to use our time, because time belongs to Krishna. And as a consequence, we try to use our time most efficiently. So one tends to give more and more of their time to their beloved because now they're falling in love, which is what Krishna wants. Krishna wants us to fall in love. But how do you fall in love when there's amnesia? How do you fall in love when you do not know the object of your love? How do you fall in love when you do not know how you're supposed to relate to the person? That is the process of anartha nivritti. You're giving up all that which has no meaning, and you're pushing yourself slowly, steadily towards knowledge, true knowledge, which is to know your relationship with Krishna. That brings about a certain efficiency, because that efficiency that comes with knowledge of knowing who I am in relationship with Krishna produces wonderful service. One is able to chant better, one is able to serve better, one is able to read better, one is able to do everything better. They would know how to use their time. Their desires would be laser-like for rest of their life once they know who they are in relationship with Krishna. There would be no wastage of time. There would be no interest whatsoever. So this is detachment. This detachment is not cessation of activity. This detachment is an increase in activity after knowing the relationship with Krishna. We basically increase. So we find that devotees who are advancing, they have a greater capacity for spending more and more of their time in service. It doesn't quite tire them, because now they're serving someone whom they know a lot more than they ever did before. Now they know that. So there is no such thing as being pushed into it. There is no, I would say, force being applied. It is quite natural, it is spontaneous. So as the knowledge of the relationship grows, one transitions from a Vaidhi sadhaka, one who is basically following the rules and regulations and being motivated because the Guru has ordered them to do, they go into what is called Ragamaga, which is serving Krishna with deep attachment because now they know the relationship. It's a very organic transition. This is not an artificial imposition. It is not something which needs to be engineered in any way. It is a very organic transition when the time comes. Many of us who have been initiated, know that the process of initiation that took place was quite organic. It was not, it wasn't managed. It just happened as we become more and more sincere. We suddenly find that there is a certain attraction to a guru, because the guru is able to motivate us in certain ways. And then we also find that we get into the process of formalizing the connection through a ceremony. And then we notice that we are steadfastly serving in different ways. And our connection to Krishna through the guru starts becoming more and more enlivened as we interact more and more. These are very organic ways for us to come in touch with Krishna. So similarly, just as much as a knowledge of a relationship grows, there would be a certain spontaneity. This spontaneity is not engineered, it is not artificial, it is not imposed upon, it is basically organic. When the mellow is discovered, there's a deeper attachment. It is like saying that Mother Yashoda does not have to chant 16 rounds for her to become a mother of Krishna. She doesn't have to understand a relationship that way. So in that sense, for one who has already discovered the relationship with Krishna, then the interaction and service to Krishna and the calling upon of his names is spontaneous. There's attachment. So these are stages. These are stages in which the bond or the relationship between the devotee and the Lord grows over a period of time. How long is that period of time is a matter of sincerity, is a matter of mercy. It's a matter of sincerity and mercy. The more intensely sincere one is, then greater is the ability of them to attract mercy. And as a consequence, there's a reciprocal arrangement where there's a greater facility for us to be able to move forward. So what we need to understand is that this is basically the process of knowledge, detachment, and devotional service. Devotional service gives both knowledge and detachment. Lord Brahma, being situated in knowledge and being detached, in other words, knowing fully well that Krishna is the doer. Krishna is the doer, and he's engaging in service of the doer. Engages in devotional service. He's basically engaging in devotional service, and he's talking about holding on to the lotus feet of the Lord, which is the source of his perfection. Now, the beginning of the second canto, we notice that we are introduced to the universal form of the Lord. The universal form of the Lord is also said to be the object of meditation for Lord Brahma when he really did not know what to do or his relationship with Krishna. So the universal form of the Lord is in reality a manifestation of the Lord which covers, or rather describes, the activities of the three modes of material nature. It has a personality. That particular universal form of the Lord has a personality who is basically worshipped as well. He is the Purusha. So there's a certain focus in meditation on the lotus feet of the Lord, understanding where what is the source of the mercy. So there's a lot of basic meditations that are given for those who worship the universal form of the Lord. And there's a manifestation of knowledge that comes through of understanding him. So this is considered to be the first step. So that is described in the first chapter. In the second chapter, there is a description of the process of yoga where one meditates on the Paramatma, the super soul within the heart. In the third chapter and further on, there are descriptions of devotional service. So first, the standard of devotional service is established by Srila Rupa Goswami. That is drawn from the principles talked about in the third chapter by Srila Sukadeva Goswami. He talks about Anyabhilashita Shunyam, Jnana Karmadi Anavritam. He talks about the fact that even if you are pursuing Jnana, which is basically coming to an understanding that this world is simply a place of suffering, and as a consequence, I need out. This is the objective of the Jnani. The Jnani is focused on moksha. If the pursuit is Jnana, you need bhakti. You need to approach Krishna. This is the terms. This is basically what is being told by Sukadeva Goswami. He also talks about karma. He says that if your objective is to achieve things in this world, please approach Krishna. So third chapter basically tells us about the fact that regardless of what motivations you have, approach Krishna. And in the same chapter, it is also being described that the best way to approach him is to not have these motivations, which is what is the basis for Srila Rupa Goswami's Anyabhilashita Shunyam Jnana Karmadi Anavritam. Then we look further into the description of the Purusha avatars. So Lord Balaram expands into Mahasankarshana. Mahasankarshana expands into Karanodakashayi Vishnu, Kshirodakashayi Vishnu, Garbhodakashayi Vishnu, the three different Purusha avatars. The sequence is Karanodakashayi Vishnu, Garbhodakashayi Vishnu, and Kshirodakashayi Vishnu. Karanodakashayi Vishnu lies on the causal ocean. Each and every time he draws his breath, all the universes collapse. Not necessarily in the same time frame, different time frames. Each and every time he exhales, the universes come into being. Then you have each universe being impregnated by Garbhodakashayi Vishnu. He enters into these universes to basically support the universe. So the entire universal support structure is being provided by Lord Garbhodakashayi Vishnu. He lies on the ocean, which is the Garbhodaka ocean, which is the water contained within the universe. And then from his navel sprouts a lotus stem. And in this lotus stem, you have the 14 planetary systems being arranged. Lord Brahma sits right at the top in Satyaloka. Then you have Kshirodakashayi Vishnu, who is basically in the universe, in the material universe, in each of these universes. It is like an outpost. He is the Gunavatara. He is basically the Gunavatara. For example, we say Lord Brahma is the Gunavatara, Lord Shiva is the Gunavatara, Kshirodakashayi Vishnu corresponds to the Gunavatara function. He also expands as a super soul into everybody's heart. So the point which we're trying to make here is that there is a certain delineation of the different avatars of the Lord, and it becomes more and more personal. We first start with the universal form. The universal form, though, is the material manifestation because it is the manifestation of Kala. It is the manifestation of the time factor, as personification of time factor of Krishna. Further out, we come into the super soul, who is again a personal form of the Lord. Then further out, we come into the Purusha avatars, personal forms of the Lord. So the universe being personal and being managed by Krishna at different capacities is being delineated. Then finally, Lord Brahma, who says he's holding on to Lord Krishna's lotus feet simply to be able to do things because he can't really do anything on his own. He gives entire credit to all the creation and all the accomplishments that he performs to Lord Krishna and holding on to devotional service, holding on to his lotus feet. Now the description starts in this particular chapter of the different Leela avatars. They're coming here to perform Leela, to enact their pastimes. The pastimes of the Lord have a hallmark. The pastimes of the Lord have the hallmark of establishing and rather invoking a certain rasa. You see, rasa means relationship or the taste of relationship. Rasa essentially is a taste because there's a certain nectar in the interaction between Krishna and his devotees. That nectar is called rasa. And he incarnates very specifically to relish that nectar. Vanquishing the demons and vanquishing and establishing order, which are functions that are functions performed by the Lord, are somewhat easily accomplished by him otherwise. He does not have to incarnate for that purpose. You see, he does not have to incarnate for that purpose, but he incarnates very specifically to interact with the devotees, to establish this relationship of rasa. So in that sense, the Leela itself, is being enacted here, right? So basically, the Leela is being described here, the different Leela avatars. These are scheduled incarnations in chapter 7. So they're slowly, steadily building up towards understanding his incarnations, ultimately culminating in the 10th canto of Srimad Bhagavatam to understand Krishna's incarnation with Balaram and the cowherd boys in Vraja, which is the most confidential aspect. But before we go there, we are also brought in touch with, I would say, forms of the Lord that physically appear complex, but in reality are simple to understand. When the Lord appears with 10 arms, 5 arms on each side, or even 10 arms on each side, when he appears with multiple arms, multiple weaponry, there's when he manifests his power, and when he's very clearly showing himself as a supreme person, he is easy to understand. He is very difficult to understand when he performs the role of a human being in Vraja. Very difficult to understand Krishna. Why? Because in Krishna avatar, he appears to be completely subservient and dependent on his devotees. He displays, or rather, he does not even allow his devotees to appreciate and basically recognize him as God. His internal potency of Yogamaya completely covers over the Aishwarya or the opulence of the Lord in the 10th canto. The opulence is covered over. There is opulence. There's extraordinary opulence in Vrindavan. It is the topmost Vaikuntha planet. But that opulence is covered over by the dust of sweetness. The dust of sweetness of Vraja covers over the opulence. So as a consequence, when you want to interact and understand Krishna, who is a 2-armed, small cowherd boy here in Vraja, it is very, very complex and confusing. His activities are not easy to understand. it is not very easy to understand Krishna. It is easy to understand a more, I would say, complex form of the Lord. The complex form of the Lord, like Nrsimhadev, who appears with many arms and he annihilates the demons and he establishes his power, protects his devotee, and then he gives a lot of support to his devotee. This is understood. It's easy to understand the omnipotence and the power of the Lord because this is God. One recognizes God by power. It's very difficult to recognize God when he is a human being grazing cows. How do you recognize Krishna? That's why Krishna and Rama even are very difficult to understand because they came in a human form. It's the simplest manifestation from a physical personality. They did not come with 10 arms and with weapons and so on. But very difficult to understand their activities. Why would Lord Ram go chasing after a deer? Why would Lord Ram, the Supreme Lord, go chasing after a golden mystical deer? We read about it in the Ramayana. Why would he go chasing after deer? Yeah. Why would Krishna shift his capital from Mathura to Dwaraka as if in fear of Jarasandha? Ranchor, he's called Ranchor. He left the battlefield. It causes infamy, but very affectionately we call him Ranchor. Yeah, he just left the battlefield and ran away. Very complex to understand an activity such as this. Very complex to understand why Lord Ram chased after a golden deer. Very complex to understand why the mother of all Lakshmis, the source of all Lakshmis, Mother Sita, why would she even desire a golden deer? Wouldn't Mother Sita or Lord Ram know it's illusionary? It's very difficult to understand the activities of the Lord in the 9th and the 10th cantos. The complexity goes higher and higher. The form becomes more simple, more human-like, but the complexity is higher and higher in terms of activity. So in the Leela avatar, we understand that he is coming to interact, and he is coming to interact, and then he is also establishing a certain, I would say, personal connection with his devotees. So when we read it, we really don't read it for the purpose of understanding his opulence as a Supreme Lord. We read it with the purpose of understanding that this is basically the Lord who has come to interact with his devotees. So we'll just go through the verses, and these verses are fairly straightforward. They do not require much interpretation. So we will go through the translation, and we will briefly speak if there is a need, or rather when we see a need, we will speak a little bit about it. Lord Brahma said, when the unlimitedly powerful Lord assumed the form of a boar as a pastime, just to lift the planet Earth, which was drowned in the great ocean of the universe called the Garbhodaka, the first demon, Hiranyaksha, appeared, and the Lord pierced him with his tusk. Now, what is interesting is that the universe is constructed in the manner of a womb. That is why it's called Garbha. Garbhodaka ocean describes the water which is contained within the universe. And it is also basically the same word is used for the womb of a mother. So there's water in the base of the womb, and the entire creation is supported by that water as the Lord supports the creation. So when Mother Earth was taken down below by the Asura, Hiranyaksha, he practically submerged Earth below the ocean of Garbhodaka, and in effect, he stopped the process of creation. He stopped the process of creation. So the Lord appears as Lord Varaha, as a boar, because the boar has a very specific sense of smell and has the ability to go deeper and then describe, or basically, he has a great, I would say, sense of smell, and he is able to unearth, or rather remove the bhumi from the bottom of the ocean. He's able to find and bring the bhumi up. Yeah. Now, what is important is that Shastra basically is that when women are pregnant women, if they have an objective of wanting to protect the pregnancy, to have safe pregnancy, they need to basically meditate on Lord Varaha. just as much as he protected the creation process during Lord Brahma's day and killed the demon Hiranyaksha and then brought the earth back up so that to facilitate the process of creation, to prevent any form of harm coming to the unborn child, worship of Lord Varaha, meditation on Lord Varaha helps immensely. This is actually a very, very powerful way to protect pregnancies. Why? Because the body of the woman, the womb of the woman, is constructed the same way as the universe is constructed. The process of creation that takes place when a woman is basically carrying a child in their womb is similar to the universe being facilitated during the process of creation. So when the process of creation within the universe is disrupted, Lord Varaha assumes the form, Krishna assumes the form of Varaha. He's called Sukara. He goes in and he brings and he refacilitates or reestablishes the process of creation. In a similar fashion, prayers to him would allow the woman to basically protect her pregnancy. This is basically very powerful. I have seen this in the sense I have given this kind of advice to many, many devotees who were, bringing a child into the world. And some of the more complex pregnancies also became very easy. So this is quite powerful. So this is very wonderful because of how, we are created in the same kind of, I would say, essence of how the universe is being created as well. The Prajapati first begot Suyajna in the womb of his wife Akuti, and then Suyajna begot demigods headed by Suyama in the womb of his wife Dakshina. Suyajna, as Indradeva, diminished very great miseries in the three planetary systems, upper, lower, and intermediate. And because he so diminished the miseries of the universe, he was later called Hari by the great father of mankind, namely Swayambhuva Manu. So basically, these are different descriptions of Krishna even appearing as Indradev. He even occupies the position of Indra. Indra, Brahma, these are positions. And these positions sometimes are occupied by the Lord to facilitate the universe when such qualified people are not found. The Lord then appeared as the Kapila incarnation, being the son of Prajapati Brahmana Kardama and his wife Devahuti, along with 9 other women, sisters. He spoke to his mother about self-realization, by which in that very lifetime she became fully cleansed of the mud of the material modes and thereby achieved liberation, the path of Kapila. So basically, Kapila, the incarnation of the Lord, this is described in the 3rd canto of Srimad Bhagavatam in quite some detail. What is interesting about this interaction between Kardama Muni and Mother Devahuti is the fact that it is one of the most powerful depictions of Grahasthashram. Grahasthashram, where Kardama Muni was an ascetic. He was sitting under a tree and sometimes he used to go into meditation for 5,000 years. Devahuti, on the other hand, came from a palace. She was the daughter of Manu. So now imagine Devahuti being alone, caring for a husband who went into this trance for 5,000 years. So this cooperation is exemplified in scripture, that this is a wonderful depiction of Grahasthashram where people of two completely different natures come together and serve each other. Then when Kardama Muni wakes up, he finds that Devahuti, Mother Devahuti's body is extraordinarily sullied because she has been leading a very harsh life, away from the palace, but then in the forest with no proper shelter, taking care of him while he's in a 5,000-year trance. Tears comes to his eyes because he sees that this person is suffering so much and has so sacrificed so much. He then wants to ask her, what is it that she desires? She says, I want to have a son, because what if you go into a 5,000-year meditation again? I need company. So quite natural, he understands the demand, so he facilitates the demand. Now, this is a sage who basically was very good in renunciation, and he was a Vairagi. He was basically had the capacity for austerity. And for him to give up all those austerities and engage in sense gratification to please his wife, that was his sacrifice. Her sacrifice was to look after him even though she came from a palace and he was sitting under a tree for 5,000 years. Yeah. So there's a wonderful interaction which is being described between the two people, husband and wife, who basically are of very different natures, and yet they cooperated selflessly. And to award a gift as a gift because of the extraordinary cooperation and acting according to the will of the Lord, Krishna himself appears as a son, that is Lord Kapila. And Lord Kapila, he is basically an incarnation who describes liberation through the process of Sankhya. Sankhya is basically understanding who we are. What is interesting is that Sankhya is knowledge of understanding who we are. So we understand that the mind, the soul, the false ego, the intelligence, or these are all different aspects of our existence. How does it happen with devotees? You see, we don't really, before coming to devotional service, we found it very difficult to distinguish the mind, intelligence, false ego. Now, coming into devotional service, even if we are just 1 year into devotional service, we have the ability to break down our desires, to break down our existence into the mind, false ego, intelligence, etc. It's quite fascinating how this knowledge of being able to break down our existence comes quite naturally by serving Krishna. This is how knowledge comes naturally. That is Sankhya. One who studies Sankhya basically is able to delineate the existence of the mind, separate the existence of the mind from intelligence, observe the action of intelligence versus action of the mind, being able to see the action of the senses influencing the mind versus the intelligence influencing the mind, being able to understand the different aspects so that they finally are able to liberate the mind. You see, the mind gets created in the mode of goodness. It assumes a certain identity in the mode of goodness. If you want to destroy that identity, or rather fix the identity issue of the mind, we need to be in the mode of goodness. So that process of being able to break down the mind and to be able to put the mind back together in terms of its service to Krishna, this whole process of Sankhya was delineated by Kapila Muni. But in devotional service, we come across what is required in this regard quite easily. It's fascinating. It is fascinating that you don't need to really do a huge subject matter study of being able to break apart the components of how our thought goes and how we react to the world. It's quite fascinating to see how devotional service gives this knowledge quite easily. So this is Lord Kapila. This is the same Lord Kapila who was insulted by the ancestors of Bhagirath. He was basically accused of stealing a sacrificial horse. Because he was accused of stealing a sacrificial horse and they approached him with violence, he was in penance. All the ancestors, almost 60,000 of them, they burst into flames and they got incinerated into ashes even before they could even approach him. Then Mother Ganga had to be brought forth by Bhagirath. So she's called Bhagirathi. She was brought forth simply to be able to liberate them so that she could pass over them. And by her passing over them, the ancestors of Bhagirath could be liberated. Yeah. It's fascinating. We will read more about it in the 9th canto. What is fascinating about that story is that such trouble was taken by the sons who were born in a certain dynasty to relieve their ancestors of this enormous burden. Such trouble. It's fascinating to see how much trouble they took generation after generation to ensure that their ancestors were liberated. There's a reason for it. Because if the ancestors are not liberated, they would cause all kinds of disturbances to the mental, emotional state of people who exist in generations further down. It is like this. If in our ancestry there was someone, say 5 generations back, 10 generations back, who committed sinful action, in other words, he was a sinful person and then he passes away, a part of his samskara, the impressions on consciousness due to him, still exist with us. Sometimes we wonder, why is it that I get thoughts which are not appropriate? I train myself in devotional service. I do so many things, but then yet why do I get some thoughts which are highly inappropriate? Sometimes these thoughts are subliminal. They come from due to the fact that we belong to a certain ancestry which has had a lot of sinful interaction, because those guys are not liberated, and because they are still imposing their consciousness upon us in certain ways. The sinful reactions of being born in a certain ancestry is so heavy that it won't allow the further generations to function. In the 9th canto, we read how much trouble the ancestors caused, that the followers of such an ancestry practically dedicated their lives to relieve them of their troubles. Imagine sitting in penance for thousands of years to please Mother Ganga. Imagine sitting in penance for thousands of years to please Lord Shiva, so that he could hold Mother Ganga as she falls into the planet, so that the planet doesn't get destroyed by the force of the water. Yeah, imagine just how much trouble there is just to relieve sinful ancestors, because they're imposing themselves in the present. This is how serious they were those days, because this knowledge was present. They could dissect their mind, and they could determine who was causing what influences to what level. This is true. If you hear this whole concept of making yearly offerings to the ancestors amongst the Hindus, yeah, you find the yearly offerings to the ancestors on a certain day. Then the monthly offering of water, which is called tarpana, during the new moon night, Amavasya. Why is such trouble being taken? Is because when you offer water or tarpana on that particular day, you're washing away the influence of ancestors from our own chitta. The influence of the ancestors is being washed away. Now, this is not a recommendation for devotees. If you're chanting Harinam and we are engaging in the service of the Lord, what is recommended by our acharyas is that you have a big feast, feed Krishna first, and then distribute prasadam to Brahmanas, Vaishnavas, and then let the Vaishnavas bless the ancestry. This is the recommendation of our acharyas. We don't specifically strategize to fix ancestral issues. But if one is not engaging properly in devotional service, then they will have problems from ancestors. That's why there's a whole concept of varnashram. What are the rules and regulations in varnashram is to relieve the ancestry, because the ancestral issues are major issues in every family, literally. All kinds of consciousness issues come from ancestry. People who have not received bodies, ancestors who haven't received bodies, they're still in a ghostly state because they were very sinful. They start imposing on further generations, causing issues, challenges, the family can't progress. So this is basically the way it was managed by the Vedic system, is to ensure that the ancestors move on. Now, Lord Kapila basically was offended, but Bhagirath took so much trouble. I was just wanting to answer this in terms of giving you a little description of the 9th canto. 9th canto is all about duty. That's why you have Bhagirath coming up there. You have Lord Ram coming up there. Yeah, Lord Ram was also very clearly serving his ancestors. Yeah, in other words, he was basically extraordinarily duty-bound towards his father. So we have all duty-related aspects come up in the 9th canto. But what is being described here is Lord Kapila's appearance to specifically interact with his mother. This is rasa, specifically describing an interaction with his mother Devahuti. That is being described here. The great sage Atri prayed for offspring, and the Lord, being satisfied with him, promised to incarnate as Atri's son, Dattatreya. Datta, the son of Atri. And by the grace of the lotus feet of the Lord, many Yadus, Haihayas, etc. became so purified that they obtained both material and spiritual blessings. Lord Dattatreya was the guru of Kartavirya Arjuna. He was also the guru of Sri Parashuram for some time. He also taught Parashuram at that point in time. He was the guru of many personalities of that particular age. If you want to learn about Dattatreya, you should learn from the interaction between Uddhava and Krishna in the 11th canto. In the 11th canto, Krishna talks about the Avadut Brahmana. He calls him the Avanti Brahmana, the Avadut Brahmana. The Avadut Brahmana, for example, you might have heard of the Avadut Brahmana, who basically, describes how he learned from the python, how the Avadut Brahmana learned from Pingala, the prostitute, etc. That Brahmana who is being described by Krishna to Uddhava is Lord Dattatreya. So if you want to read about it, you should go to the 11th canto. To create different planetary systems, I had to undergo austerities and penance, and the Lord, being pleased with me, incarnated in 4 Sanas: Sanaka, Sanat Kumara, Sanandana, and Sanatana. In the previous creation, the spiritual truth was devastated, but the 4 Sanas explained it so nicely that the truth at once became clearly perceived by the sages. It is not surprising if we read in the Bhagavatam that spiritual truth was devastated. Mahaprabhu appeared in the 15th century. But then by the time Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur came in 18th century, or the 19th century as we would call it, in the 19th century when Bhaktivinoda Thakur came, there were so many Apasampradayas. They had drawn principles from Gaudiya Vaishnavism. They had completely taken and misrepresented the teachings of Mahaprabhu to such an extent that the Gaudiya Vaishnava principles were completely disarranged and completely in a mess. It was Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur who put everything back together. So it's fascinating to see that here the 4 Kumaras basically appeared, and they were incarnations of the Lord who practically put transcendental knowledge and spiritual knowledge back in order. So the spiritual knowledge being devastated by material energy, in other words, covered over by material energy, is not very surprising. In a matter of 4 centuries, you had Mahaprabhu, and then you had the advent of Aurangzeb, and as a consequence, Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur, the great acharyas, they were basically forced to move all the deities away. And then you had Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur, who practically translated Srimad Bhagavatam for us. We draw a lot from Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur's translations. And then there was Baladev Vidyabhushan Prabhu, who practically wrote the Vedanta Sutra with the Gaudiya commentary, which is the Govinda Bhashya. Yeah. So basically what we are trying to say here is covering over of spiritual truths by material energy is not a big deal. It happens all the time. It happens all the time. Now Srila Prabhupada, he came and he gave us 60 volumes of books. He gave us Srimad Bhagavatam. He gave us Chaitanya Charitamrita, the Bhagavad Gita. Now he has practically distributed these books around the world. It is actually in a position where this particular knowledge will remain with the world for a long, long time. And that is the reason why we use the word saying Srila Prabhupada is the Shiksha Guru for the next 10,000 years. Is because Srila Prabhupada's books and Srila Prabhupada's purports and his knowledge is basically whatever he provided us as translations is going to be remaining for a long time. But the point is, it can get covered over. Spiritual truth can get covered over by material energy. You notice after Krishna comes as Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, this Krishna himself, few years later, there's so much confusion. 400 years later, there's so many Apasampradayas, so much obfuscation of Gaudiya Vaishnava truth. Now we are finding that here it is being mentioned that the Kumaras came and that they re-established spiritual truth. So they are empowered incarnations. They are empowered to function in a certain way. They have been empowered to re-establish spiritual truth. In other words, they may not have all the powers of the Supreme Lord. They are empowered for a certain task which was monumental and which could not have been done by anybody else. And as a consequence, they are called incarnations, but they are Shakti Avesha. They are basically avatars who are being empowered with power of the Lord to accomplish a certain objective. To exhibit his personal way of austerity and penance, he appeared in twin forms as Narayana and Nara, in the womb of Murti, the wife of Dharma, and the daughter of Daksha. Celestial beauties, the companions of Cupid, went to try to break his vows, but they were unsuccessful, for they saw that many beauties like them were emanating from him, the personality of Godhead. Naranarayana Rishi was basically the source of Srimad Bhagavatam. They were the ones who preached the gist and the essence of Srimad Bhagavatam to Lord Sri Narad Muni. Sri Narad Muni took the gist from Naranarayana Rishi and he preached to Srila Vyasadeva. The gist was given. Yeah, we're going to discuss the gist in chapter 9, but the gist was given by Naranarayana Rishi. So this Naranarayana Rishi were incarnations of the Lord. They displayed vows of tapasya and knowledge. Great stalwarts like Lord Shiva can by their wrathful glances overcome lust and vanquish him, yet they cannot be free from the overwhelming effects of their own wrath. Such wrath can never enter into the heart of him, the Lord, who is above all this. So how can lust take shelter in his mind? So great stalwarts, Lord Shiva was performing penance. And when he was performing great penance, the transcendental, I would say, when he was engaging in activities of penance, tapasya, Cupid, Kamadeva, he comes to distract him from his penance, not realizing whom he is dealing with. That is when Lord Shiva, being distracted, opens his eyes, but the fire that poured forth from Lord Shiva's eyes practically incinerates Kamadeva. So the wrath which comes from him for being disturbed practically incinerates. So in one sense, tapasya produces a great amount of power, but also there's also a great amount of, I would say, anger that can pour forth when there is such great tapasya. That's why in our spiritual services, we talk about tapasya. Tapasya in devotional service, hardship, knowing the mellows of devotional service, that doesn't harden the heart, but otherwise it can harden the heart. Because you're going through a lot, the body is being put through a lot, one can become very wrathful if they're disturbed. That's why it's very common to see these great sages and the munis becoming angry, when they're disturbed. There's great fire, there's Agni. There's great Agni. So the Agni basically is such that it can destroy. Being insulted by sharp words spoken by the co-wife of the king, even in his presence, Prince Dhruva, though only a boy, took to severe penances in the forest, and the Lord, being satisfied by his prayer, awarded him the Dhruva planet, which is worshipped by great sages, both upward and downward. The Dhruva planet has all the characteristics of a Vaikuntha planet, and it is not destroyed when the creation is being destroyed. It is actually quite a fascinating reward for Dhruva Maharaj, because he was such a young boy. It is being insulted by the sharp words spoken by the co-wife of the king. So the co-wife of the king, which is his stepmother, she insults him and says that you cannot sit on your father's lap unless you come into my womb and become my son. So in other words, she's telling him, Dhruva, you need to die, and then you need to have the good fortune of coming into my womb and being born as my child. Then you can sit on your father's lap. Then she says, for you to really accomplish the task of coming into my womb, you need to worship Lord Narayana. What is fascinating in this account is the fact that this is a stepmother who is actually envious, and she is wanting this boy to die, because what else does it mean when you say you basically have to come and be born in my womb? She's saying who you are should perish, and then come into my womb, then you can sit on your father's lap. But what is fascinating is she instructs him to go and meditate on Narayan. And then what does happen is that Dhruva runs to his biological mother. His biological mother, instead of becoming overwhelmed by anger, and instead of becoming extraordinarily emotional, she is such a powerful woman, she looks at her son and hears what her co-wife said. I'm sorry, I would say the second wife, the wife of the king said, and says, she's not wrong. She's not wrong about the worship of Narayana. So she does not discourage or practically dissuade her son from the instruction. This is fascinating because normally a mother would become very emotional when she hears that her son has been insulted. But here, the mother, hearing that her son has been insulted, has the ability to dissect the insult and pick out what is really good and agree with the good part, saying she's not wrong. Because if you want to achieve anything in life, you need to worship Narayana. So this is fascinating. And Srila Prabhupada says, because this particular mother encouraged the son to worship Lord Narayana, she was also liberated along with Dhruva Maharaj because she performed the role of a Siksha Guru. Srila Prabhupada, in his humility, says that we are also hoping that one of our disciples would be accomplished enough to liberate themselves so that we could be liberated, because we have instructed our disciples to chant Harinam. This is Srila Prabhupada in his extraordinary humility in that particular purport in Dhruva Maharaj's Katha. So that is what is being described here. I'm going to stop here. We are actually in verse 8. I'll continue further in the session that follows because I'm having some engagement at 6 o'clock, so I want to take questions first, and then I want to conclude by 6. So I'll stop here, and then we'll go further in the subsequent session. So any questions so far?
Hare Krishna Prabhu. Thank you
Hari Bol.
again. Hari Bol. Thank you again for a wonderful class. The question I have today is slightly not irrelevant to today's discussion. Is that okay?
That's all right. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So basically, my understanding about Guru Tattva. So currently, my spiritual master is unwell. So I just want to understand the Guru Tattva. So does the Guru and disciple relationship, is it pertinent to that soul? So if Guru, for example, hypothetically leaves, they come back again to the same disciple again to liberate, or is it the Guru Tattva?
See, fundamentally, the system that we have is called a system for a certain reason. The Guru Parampara is a system of, I would say, cooperation, where if a guru leaves, the guru has the ability to manage the disciples' journey by entrusting them with someone who carries their likeness in further lifetimes as well, or they have the ability to inspire them from within. Yeah. So it need not be a circumstance where the guru leaves and they have to come back to basically liberate the disciple. They can make arrangements. So there are a lot of details given in Shastra where it also depends on the power of the spiritual master as to where they are in the spiritual sky. If they're situated in the spiritual sky, they say both feet in the spiritual sky, then they have the ability to direct the wanderings of the disciple, make arrangements, make themselves available in certain ways. They don't have to come down and then reincarnate here for them to just pick up disciples. But we would want to understand that in the material world, there is always a certain, I would say, duality that is present. And the duality is such that material energy, material reactions to our actions, they can't disappear. Of course, you can perform sadhana, and we are engaging in sadhana bhakti, we are calling upon Krishna's names. And as a consequence of calling upon Krishna's names, we have the ability to be freed from the influence of all karmic reactions. However, when the guru takes on a disciple, the guru also forms a certain connection with the disciple. So whatever good and bad the disciple does also impacts the guru because there is a direct connection as well. As a consequence, you find even advanced souls, on the planet, they go through a lot of struggles. So we found Srila Prabhupada having all kinds of health difficulties. The health difficulties increased quite dramatically as he increased the number of disciples, because the responsibility of disciples, their actions start impacting the guru as well. And his health starts failing because of that. Prabhupada, everybody observed Prabhupada's stature. When he was 70, he did not require a walking stick. But then very soon, after certain number of disciples, the walking stick became a necessary item of, I would say, his paraphernalia. He had to carry a walking stick because there were certain effects. Similarly, if one were to engage in samskaras, then the karmic reactions of performing the samskara would immediately affect the brahmana. Yeah. Similarly, you read in the Srimad Bhagavatam that the brahmana who accepts alms takes on karmic reactions. He bestows pious activities upon pious results upon those who gives alms. So there is an exchange of karma in relationships such as this, where responsibility is taken for the future. As a consequence, what we are saying is if the personality doesn't have the ability to completely digest it, or they're overwhelmed in so many different ways, then there are chances that they may have to come back simply because they have to answer for the karmic reactions and responsibilities taken on by them in service to their disciples. So in reality, what we should understand is that there's a system. That system has the capacity to take care of each and every soul that is connected to it. So if we're coming into this parampara and we are connected to Srila Prabhupada through one of his disciples, Srila Prabhupada and many of the disciples have the capacity to be able to take care of whoever is connected to them fully throughout the journey and beyond as well. Yeah, beyond as well. So there should be no concern in terms of us being taken care of, and neither should we think that it's a necessity for someone to come back. There's a system which can be adopted where they can take care of them quite powerfully, depending on their stature, spiritual stature. I hope this is adequate for your question.
Yes, it is indeed. So I'm just trying to calibrate what you're saying. So basically, the spiritual master makes a choice. He can come or he cannot. But if he's out of his compassion want to liberate his disciples, he can choose. So in one sense, all the different Goswamis and others could reincarnate again back into ISKCON as gurus to liberate disciples.
Well, there is no need is the point I'm trying to make.
Yeah, I understand.
The point
There's
I'm
no
trying to
need.
make, and no, there is no need for someone very highly situated to come again. Yeah, there is no need. You see, the Christians, for example, in the Christian Judeo-Christian faith, sometimes they say that they're waiting for Christ to come back again. You see, sometimes you hear of Christ needing to come back again to deliver the Christians. Now the question is that when he came first, he suffered so much. Why would we want him to come back again? You see, we don't want him to come back again. We want him to be in the spiritual sky as he has already gone there. So in that sense, what I'm saying is that the system itself has the capacity to take care of the disciple. The guru-disciple relationship is very powerful. It's a very personal relationship. Even if the guru situates themselves in the spiritual sky, they have the ability to take care of the disciple's journey. They do not need to come back down here for the disciple to be liberated. That is the point I want to make. Yeah, there is no need. We shouldn't worry. In fact, what I want to say is that depending on our sincerity, our ability to connect to the guru will become even more profound if they leave, depending on our sincerity. So depending on the disciple's sincerity, the guru's presence in their life, even if they are not in the world, will be even more profound. So there is no concern here in terms of what I would call as the process itself because of the departure of the guru. There is no concern here. Yeah. But what is an advantage in one sense is that this very personal and loving relationship becomes even more sweeter when there's a crisis, because then we get to take the guru into our heart in a much deeper way, and we pray for him, and we basically are wanting to serve him, and we also regret, we couldn't have done this, we could have done that, etc. So all of these are very powerful meditations that bring us closer to him as well.
Yeah. True. And it's also, I remember him saying that, as you said, after every initiation, he says, I take on a lot of karma. And he says that I don't mind taking all that karma. And he says, I don't mind coming back again. Doesn't matter which planetary position I am. If I have to serve Krishna, if I have to serve the holy name, obviously that's his, consciousness.
Which is the truth, because for him, it doesn't matter where he is. It doesn't matter if Prabhupada wants him to come back and then serve in a certain way. It doesn't matter in terms of if Prabhupada were to send him to a different planet where Prabhupada is serving. We don't know. The point is, their mood is to serve Harinam and Gauranga Mahaprabhu, and they do it with love. It is not done as a burden. In other words, taking on karma is not a burden. It is done with a lot of love by the guru as well. When they take on a disciple, it is like a parent taking on a child and the responsibilities of a child. In that sense, they take on, there is definitely a lot of trouble in taking care of children, but then it is also done with a lot of love, in a similar fashion.
Thank you, Prabhu. Thank you so much.
Sure. So let me just read a couple of chat questions. Okay, please can you let me know if I have proclivity to hear Krishna Katha. Will that help me in deepen my relationship with Krishna? Or should I engage in preaching explicitly, which will help me in deepening my sambandha? You see, it is said that when we have a desire to share, we receive a lot more. So in that sense, if you're only concerned about ourselves, we may not receive as much as we would receive if we have a desire to share. So desiring to share is definitely the greatest advantage. Yeah, that's a better advantage. Also, when you're mentioning that austerities performed by sages sometimes causes a lot of agni or anger when disturbed, can you explain how we as aspiring devotees dissipate anger? Anger is dissipated by Ekadashi fasting and also by engaging in menial seva in the temple, also by hearing and participating in kirtan. Now, next question. You said that we should throw away aspects of our lives that are not related to Krishna. Is following the 4 regulative principles enough, or is there a need to go further? See, the point is, Krishna consciousness, the objective of Krishna consciousness is not the 4 regulative principles. We are not interested in giving up life. We are in fact interested in being even more enlivened and filled with strength so that we can serve. When I said throwing away aspects of that which is not related to Krishna, I literally talked about the fact that we would lose interest. We would lose interest. It's just a matter of time. You see, there would be distaste to a lifestyle which existed before Krishna consciousness. It may not fully happen, but it will progressively happen over a period of time where we would notice that we are not really enthused about things that are unrelated. So it's a very natural process. It is not so much being forced upon. The 4 regulative principles, on the other hand, are necessary in certain ways for us to slowly, steadily not add more and more impressions on our consciousness while we are trying to clear the old impressions. It is like you're trying to clean a room, but then you're again bringing in a bag full of dust and then throwing it all over the wall. Then it becomes a task which is quite, I would say, discouraging. As a consequence, what is required is for us to follow the 4 regulative principles, which essentially would allow us to remain in the mode of goodness, and also to ensure that we don't pollute our chitta by impressions that we have already cast away. So it's almost like saying that, we are becoming dirty, and it's a process that never ends because we are polluting ourselves. So we have to stop somewhere. That's the whole purpose of 4 regulative principles. 4 regulative principles of freedom, because as you become free from passion and ignorance, then that is real freedom. So that's the whole idea. Okay, so is there any one question that I can take, or 2 questions? I think we have 15 minutes.
Yeah.
Hare Krishna.
Yes, Haribo.
Haribo. Prabhu, the earlier question, I need a kind of a clarification for this one, which you replied to Mataji about spiritual master coming back. Once my spiritual master, His Holiness Pataka Maharaj, said that he said to Srila Prabhupada, I want to serve you life after life. I want to always serve you. So Srila Prabhupada replied to him, it seemed, why do you want your spiritual master to come back? So
Yes.
he always he says, be serious if you're taking initiation, be serious, try to make it this time. Even
Yes,
in
true.
this time in birth, mentioned.
No, actually,
So I just want to
sorry, go ahead. Please finish. I didn't realize that you were continuing. Go ahead.
Yeah, I just want to understand like where these both answers go correct,
There is no contradiction. There is no contradiction. The spiritual master doesn't have to come back. There is no need, because the system that we are in is very powerful. There are times when someone would get very attached to Bhaktivinoda Thakur. Does it mean that Bhaktivinoda Thakur cannot interact with devotees who are not connected to him when he was on the planet? No. Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur will interact with devotees even now. Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur has the capacity to interact. The Goswamis have the capacity to interact depending on our consciousness. So the point I'm trying to make here is that the spiritual sky And all the personalities who have come onto the planet to serve serve Chaitanya Mahaprabhu are ever present, and it's a system. So they're all like one person is connected to the other. So we are not essentially dependent just on one person. We are dependent on a chain of disciplic succession. Needless to say, that disciplic succession is being served by our spiritual master, and we are serving him to basically get connected. But we are dependent on the entire chain of disciplic succession. So in that sense, what I'm trying to say is that we basically, when we get initiated, are coming in touch with an entire system of great personalities. And as a consequence, there should be no fear whatsoever of not being able to move forward because the physical manifestation of the spiritual master is over. There should be no fear. So there is no contradiction here at all. Yeah? If there is a need, Srila Prabhupada, if Mahaprabhu tells Srila Prabhupada that he has to come back again, he will. It may not be immediately. It may come back, 400 years down the line. We don't know. I'm just saying. Yeah? We just don't know where Mahaprabhu is wanting him to serve. Similarly, the attachment of Jayapataka Maharaj to Srila Prabhupada was that he wanted him to be his spiritual master. He wanted to serve him. I think that exchange between Jayapataka Maharaj and Srila Prabhupada was also a little bit, I would say, it contained a little bit of jest or lightheartedness rather than more precise, instructions. Does it make sense? It was a more lighthearted exchange between the two of them.
Yeah, when he was very, very young, and he said to him, "I want to serve you." Then immediately he looked at him and said, "So why do you want your spiritual master to come back?"
Yeah. So this is more of a lighthearted exchange between the two of them. I would say that it is a lighthearted exchange. Sometimes what happens, the room conversations between Prabhupada and the disciple, sometimes beach conversations or letters, sometimes we need to understand the context. If we don't understand the context, then what would happen is basically we can take it literally, and then it sometimes could appear as if it is contradicting something else. In reality, there may be no contradiction. It might just be a very contextual statement. So in this case, I don't see any contradiction whatsoever. Yeah.
Thank you very much, Prabhu. Thanks. Thank
you. Sure.
Prabhu, saying on the same note, I remember at one point Srila Prabhupada saying that Jayapataka Maharaj is Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's associates. He's come back once again. So that's, is it
Sorry,
true or
say
not?
that again.
Jayapataka Maharaj, I remember Prabhupada said two of them of the ISKCON is part of Mahaprabhu's associate, and he's mentioned Jayapataka Maharaj to be one of them. That Jayapataka Maharaj was an associate of Mahaprabhu, and he's come back. I mean, has come to ISKCON to help us and liberate us and so on and so forth. So the point is that they do come again.
If there is a need, yes.
Yes.
It's completely need-based.
It's not compulsion.
There is no compulsion. So there's no need because there's a system. That's the point I was trying to make.
Yeah.
Okay, so let me just see one more question in chat. Why do we feel more connected to Gauranga? I feel his mood is more merciful, like a mother. Can we aim to Gauranga and Jagannath and not to Krishna, even though we read Sikshashtakam and try to follow the mood of Gauranga because of a love for Gauranga, but not able to understand Krishna? I understand all the same, but I can't understand Krishna, so am I making an offense? Actually, no, because Gaura Bhakti is Krishna Bhakti. And we see in the Chaitanya Chaitamrita, Murari Gupta Prabhu being attached to Lord Ram because he is somehow connected to Lord Ram as Hanumanji's. And then you have the Brahmachari, the Narasimha Brahmachari. He is basically a devotee of Lord Narasimhadev. As a consequence, he basically was constantly serving Lord Narasimhadev, and Jagannath and then Lord Gauranga proved to him that he's non-different. So there really is no contradiction. You see, these are relationships that evolve, and our system is very simple. We need to be very careful and follow rules and regulations very carefully to position ourselves to receive mercy. And as we position ourselves to receive mercy from Lord Gauranga. And the mercy that we receive from Lord Gauranga allows us to serve the divine couple. So it's a process. there is no need for us to feel that one or the other is a compromise. There could be someone who is very attached to the divine couple who cannot relate to Lord Gauranga. Yeah. For me personally, I find it extraordinarily, I would say, attractive in my own personal worship of Gauranga Mahaprabhu. For me, it is just Gauranga. Yeah, it is just Gauranga because for me, it is both Radha and Krishna together, and it's just a fascinating representation. So for me, it's Lord Gauranga who is very, I'm very attached to him. But does it mean that I don't worship my Giriraj? No. Does it mean that I don't worship Jagannath? No. The point I'm just trying to make is that we don't need to feel bad about these attractions. We should just allow our heart to flow just naturally. That's simple as that. There really isn't any offense. Any other question or comment?
Prabhuji,
Yes.
one more doubt, please. Dandavat Pranam. So, is it an offense to talk to different forms of Krishna in different ways? Like, initially, if, for example, if we are worshipping Laddu Gopal and we were communicating and praying in certain way, and then after few years, we started serving Shyam Sundara, and we started communicating in a different way. And in our altar, we have Laddu Gopal and Shyam Sundara photo also. Now, it is a confusion when we pray. When we pray, we continue to pray our deity, our Laddu Gopal. But when we have to, like, we are getting more attached to Shyam Sundar now because of serving Shyam Sundar. And then when we talk to Shyam Sundar, it is in a different way. Is it wrong? Sometimes I'm feeling, am I neglecting Laddu Gopal? I'm talking more to Shyam Sundar now. But I still come back home, take care of my Laddu Gopal. But the communication has, I don't know how, but I'm just thinking, is it wrong?
Yeah, see, one of the things that we need to do is, and this is a broad instruction. It is not, I would say, particularly related to your question. The broad instruction is that we need to follow vidhi when we are worshipping deities. Even if we have attachment and we are worshipping deities, we still follow vidhi. Vidhi means that we follow rules, regulations of approach. We follow rules and regulations of worship. We follow things that are absolutely necessary in terms of etiquette or the norms, etc., enunciated in the Pancharatra, Pancharatra Vidhi. We need to do all of this when we are approaching the deities, particularly, especially while we are in Vaidhi Sadhana Bhakti. Even if our Vaidhi Sadhana Bhakti goes away and it develops into a deeper level of, let us say, attachment on the basis of being able to interact and speak to Krishna, or rather, communicate in a more casual manner when we are approaching the deity, we would still need to follow procedure and vidhi because that is the recommended proper way by our acharyas. And this is done by even those who are very advanced. Yeah, that would allow us to appreciate, things as we come along. In other words, as we worship and our worship increases, our standards remain the same, we would be able to appreciate our advancement as time goes by. So I was just wanting to give a broad general instruction that we should follow rules and regulations regardless of whether it is Shyam Sundar or Laddu Gopal. And we should be careful about, I would say, putting anything which can be outside of rules in the initial stages, because sometimes it may cause certain challenges as we proceed further. Yeah. So I was just wanting to say that. So when you use the word talking to the deities, I'm presuming that you are having a mental conversation of worship, and you are more casual when you talk to Laddu Gopal, while you're more serious when you talk to Shyam Sundar because there are rules and regulations, etc. I'm saying it is better to follow same rules and regulations both places, because they will generally be conducive in terms of devotional service until we reach a level of maturity. Even then, we continue rules and regulations. So that is what is required. Does it make sense? I'm giving you something which you can simply formulate and kind of take your question and put it through. If you have anything more on this, you can write to me. Yeah?
Okay, Prabhuji, thank you. Yeah, one thing that I didn't understand, there is a vidhi even to have a mental conversation with deities. I didn't know that actually.
Well, basically, even in mental conversation, the best vidhi is to follow the footsteps of the acharyas. Every acharya has written prayers of worship. Every one of them has eulogized the Lord. It is better for us to pray to the specific, I would say, guru in our lineage, or rather the personality who has written before, and then pray to them for giving us shelter in the lotus feet, so that we could approach the deities the same way as they have. Yeah, the same humility. Does it make sense? It is better to offer prayers through the prayers of our acharyas. This way, communicate with the deity is the point I'm trying to make.
Yes, exactly the point, Guruji. Like when I sing, I try to sing Gopi Geet, and when I sing Gopi Geet, I try to sing it to Shyam Sundar. But when I sing, I have a habit of singing a lullaby for Laddu Gopal from many years when I make him sleep at night. But
that's fine.
That's
fine.
The difference.
That's fine. You see, I think if you have more questions on this, you can write to me.
Sure, Prabhuji. Thank you. Thanks a lot.
Thank you. Sure. Okay, I think I can take one question and we can end today's class, and we will continue again the following week. I have 2 minutes.
I have a question if nobody else wants, because I have already asked. I'd rather have anybody else, but if nobody else, then I have a question.
You can ask if I
okay.
don't think anybody does. Yeah.
Okay, so basically, you said in the class today that Krishna comes for 2 reasons: paritranaya sadhunam, vinashaya chaduskritam, and then most importantly, you mentioned that it is to have mellow with the devotees, to have to have exchange. So I mean, I'm just thinking about the different yugas. So when Rama came, that's the Dwarpa Yuga, correct?
Treta Yuga.
Treta Yuga. So when Rama came in the Treta Yuga, Lord Ram came, he went into the forest, and they were all devotees waiting for him to come, and he went to have different huts, and he had association with them. And I believe at that time, I may be wrong, correct me if I'm, he said that the Munis wanted to have more association with the Lord, and he said, I'm coming back again in Dwarpa Yuga, and all of these Munis actually later came as gopis in Dwarpa Yuga. So I was thinking the next one is Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. And there was this different Mayavad sannyasis who were there during that time, where Chaitanya Mahaprabhu visited them and told them that's not how you have to follow. This is how you have to follow, and gave them instructions through conversations, through dialogues, through even having competitions. My question now is, again, was that a rasa kind of thing? They were also devotees, and Mahaprabhu came again to give association, and they were similar to the same pattern of the other 2 yugas. Is my understanding? I'm just trying to.
In Kali Yuga, especially in Mahaprabhu's incarnation, this was a hidden incarnation.
Yeah.
And that is number 1. Number 2 is the fact that he has come to deliver most of us. Okay. You see, this is a very different circumstance than Treta Yuga, where there was an opportunity for the great sages who had performed austerities, who were waiting to see Lord Ram and interact with him. Them being born as gopis, that's a very different comparison to Mahaprabhu delivering, let us say, for example, someone in who was basically impersonalist and who becomes a personalist after coming in touch with Mahaprabhu. Will
Okay.
there be some rasa in the future? Perhaps, if they sincerely took up Mahaprabhu's instruction, sincerely took up the dust of the devotees at that point in time. Absolutely, because you got to remember this. Even in Mahaprabhu's time, in Lord Rama's time, in Krishna's time, there were a vast majority of the world which rejected them.
They didn't.
So,
Yeah, they didn't. They
yeah,
didn't know that he was the supreme personality of Godhead, or they didn't accept him.
no, regardless, even when they knew, they just couldn't accept it because there was no adhikar, there was no authority. So there's always a matter of authority. I'm bringing the word. The sages whom Lord Rama met had authority. They could come back as gopis, authority or adhikar to interact with the Lord. But that may not be the case with others in Mahaprabhu's incarnation.
Okay. Thank you, Prabhu.
Okay, so yeah, thank you very much. And I'm going to end today's session because it's 6 o'clock and I have to go. And I thank you very much for participating. If those of you who still have any questions, please write to me. I would be happy to leave an answer back after contemplation. Yeah, thank you very much. Srila
Thank you.
Prabhupada ki jai.
Prabhupada ki jai. Dandavad pranam.
Hare Krishna. Dandavat.
Hare